Dean Rourke woke to the taste of blood and metal. His cheek pressed against the cold floor of a cell, the metallic scent of antiseptic barely covering something darker. Fear, maybe death. Fluorescent green lights pulsed along the seams of the walls, casting shadows that moved when he didn't. A mechanical voice buzzed from above. Subject 17B, conscious. Begin calibration. He pushed himself up slowly, limbs aching. His uniform was gone, replaced with a gray utility suit that clung to him like damp skin. A long vertical scar glowed on his forearm, a fresh brand from the intake chamber. Property of the Zarnathi Empire. Dean sat cross-legged in the center of the cell. The walls shimmered, and a new pattern emerged, shifting lines, fractal spirals, optical illusions designed to induce vertigo and mental collapse. Every 5 seconds the color palette shifted, green to red to ultraviolet. The Zarnathi didn't believe in pain as much as they believed in breaking the mind. A hiss echoed. The wall opposite him liquefied, reshaped into a window. Behind it stood a massive reptilian figure, scales like molten stone, a mouth filled with triangular fangs. Commander Traskulas. You are calm, the alien rasped. Humans scream by now. Dean blinked slowly, suppressing a smirk. Maybe you just got the wrong model. Trask didn't respond immediately. His eyes, 2 golden slits, narrowed. Do you believe this is a test of strength? Dean stretched his neck. I think you're compensating for something. The window darkened. The floor vibrated. High-frequency sounds began pulsing through the room, just low enough not to be heard, just intense enough to grind against the base of the skull. Dean clenched his jaw, muscles twitching, but didn't move. He started counting in his head. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3. At 89, the noise cut out. Curious. Traska's voice returned. Most beings lose consciousness by 30. Dean rolled his shoulders. Guess Earth forgot to send the manual. The walls shifted again. This time, they displayed images, flashing frames of human soldiers being dragged through similar rooms, eyes vacant, limbs trembling. He recognized one. Private Linson. The kid had been stationed with him on EOS 7. Dean's fists tightened. Pain means little, Trask said. It is the absence of identity that undoes you. Cute speech, Dean replied. Is that from your mating handbook? There was a pause. Then a low, guttural snarl. The window vanished. The room dimmed. Dean exhaled, heart thumping. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep baiting the monster before it turned personal. But that was the plan, make Trask angry. Angry beings made mistakes. He moved to a corner, laid down on his back, and stared at the ceiling. It flickered between static and soft red light, simulating a heartbeat, one not quite human, off just enough to create subconscious unease. They were trying to desync his brain rhythms. Dean let his mind wander. He thought of Chavez, the guy who never shut up about old Earth music. The man had once sung a whole Taylor Swift song during a plasma grenade exchange. You okay, Rourke? Chavez had asked that day, coughing blood but smiling. I'm still prettier than you, Dean had said. He smiled faintly now, then forced himself back to the moment. Focus. He looked around the cell. No camera lenses. No visible seams on the door. But there was a rhythm, light pulses every 6 seconds, audio bursts every 10. Somewhere, someone had to be operating that manually or at least monitoring him. Which meant a pattern. Which meant predictability. Time passed. Hard to tell how much. Hours maybe. A click. The door hissed open. 2 Zarnathi guards entered, each taller than a human by half a meter, skin like rusted armor. They approached with slow, deliberate steps. Subject 17B, stand. Dean obeyed, posture loose. One of them jabbed him in the gut with a staff. Electric pain shot up his spine, but he didn't cry out. The guard grunted in disapproval. Follow. They marched him down a corridor of living metal. The walls seemed to ripple as they walked. Alien biology fused with tech, organic circuits pulsing like veins. They arrived at a chamber. In the center, a chair with restraints, facing a spherical screen that hovered in the air. Images flickered across it: battlefields, burning cities, screaming civilians. Earth under siege. Dean was shoved into the chair. The restraints clamped tight. Traska's voice again. "Tell me, Sergeant Rourke, what do you fear?" Dean licked his cracked lips. "Boredom." The chair tilted back. A needle extended, poised just above his temple. "This will explore your deepest fears," Trask said. "There is no resistance in the mind. Only delay." Dean stared at the point of the needle. "Then let's not waste time." The needle dropped. But just before it touched skin, Dean whispered, "You know what's funny?" Silence. "The first time I got tortured, I was 12. By a high school bully with a sadistic streak and a swing set. You're gonna have to try harder." The needle retracted. Trask didn't speak. For once, the alien was still. Dean smiled. That was the crack. By the time they dragged him back to the cell, Dean's body was bruised, but his mind intact. He sat cross-legged again. The door sealed. He exhaled. 10 minutes later, a soft chuckle echoed through the empty room. The camera blinked red. He was still laughing. Dean's knuckles were split from the strain of resisting, but his grin was intact. Pain had already been catalogued, processed, and filed away. His cell pulsed its sickly green again, but by now the flickering lights were more annoying than oppressive. He leaned against the wall, eyes scanning the seams and shadows. No cameras, yet they knew his every move. The walls were alive, monitoring him, organic tech, probably networked directly into the ship's AI. Watching. Always watching. He needed allies. He needed noise. The walls shifted again, not the illusionary patterns this time, but actual displacement. A hatch to the side melted open, revealing another corridor. Without warning, a second cell emerged across from his. Inside was a woman. She looked human, but her face was gaunt, pale, lips dry and cracking. Her hair had thinned to patches, but her eyes, glass blue, burning with quiet fury, met his. She pressed her fingers to the transparent barrier. "You're new." Dean tilted his head. "And you're fashionably overdue for a rescue." Her mouth twitched, a flicker of a smile. "Name's Kara," she said. "Lieutenant. Scout Division. Been here, too long to count." "Dean," he replied. "Marine. Special Ops. Been here 2 trauma sequences and 1 alien ego trip." A sharp clank interrupted their exchange. The wall beside Dean shifted, revealing a third cell. Inside, an older man, skin gray from stress, one eye swollen shut, sat in the far corner, motionless. His breathing was shallow. "Who's that?" Dean asked. Kara didn't look at him. "Used to be Captain Varn. Fleet Intel. Now, they just call him Subject 3. Dean studied the man's still frame. "They break people here," Kara said. "Not with whips. With silence. With loops. They replay your fears, your guilt, again and again until you don't know if your screams are real." Dean stayed quiet. "They showed me my brother," she added. "Showed me his death, over and over. Every time I tried to save him, I failed. My hands burned, but I kept trying." Dean looked down. "They showed me Chavez." Kara frowned. "Was he real?" Dean nodded. "He went down singing country songs on EO7 while tossing back a grenade." Kara blinked slowly. "That's the most human thing I've heard in weeks." Dean walked to the wall that separated them. "You still got fight in you?" Kara hesitated. "Enough to recognize it in someone else." The lights blinked red. Sirens didn't follow, just silence. A change in routine. That wasn't random. Trask was watching them talk, testing responses, tracking patterns. Dean turned toward the camera's presumed direction. "Well, Commander," he said aloud, "how about a group discount? Break 3 for the price of 1? The walls didn't respond. Kara's voice dropped. "You know what this place really is? Besides the galaxy's worst Airbnb." It's a lab, she whispered. A behavioral experiment. They don't just torture us, they study us. Responses to stress, to hope, to interaction. Dean nodded slowly. That's why they didn't isolate us. They want us to form bonds. Then watch them snap. Dean took a breath. Then let's give them something to write home about. She met his eyes again. You have a plan? I make it up as I go. Kara's laugh was brief, but real. Suddenly, the older man across the hall stirred. His head turned, revealing the cybernetic implant where his left eye had been. A faint red glow blinked behind a cracked lens. Dean stepped closer. Captain? The man's voice was raspy, slurred. It's not real. None of this. They're dead. I'm dead. You're a memory. Dean knelt by the glass. No. You're awake, Captain. And we're getting out. Varn shook his head slowly. I saw it. Earth fell. I watched it burn. Kara spoke up. That's the loop, Varn. They showed me my team dying on repeat. It's not truth, just trauma on playback. Dean added. The real world's still out there, and we've got one job left, remind it we're not gone. Silence. Then a faint nod from Varn. Dean stepped back, calculating. If they want to study resilience, he said, we give them the full show. Kara raised a brow. Meaning? Every time they push, we push harder. No submission, no despair. We build each other back up. And if they separate us again, then we plant the idea before they do. Unity. Defiance. Contagious hope. Let it spread through the cells like wildfire. The wall shimmered again, this time forming a new screen above the corridor. Traska's face appeared, massive, scaled, unreadable. You conspire, he hissed. Interesting. Your cooperation accelerates data. Dean looked up at him, completely unfazed. Glad we're making your spreadsheets more exciting. Trask leaned closer, yellow eyes like twin infernos. You believe words can shield you from the inevitable? No, Dean said. But they can prepare us for it. Trask said nothing. The screen blinked out. The lights returned to static green. Kara exhaled. That was bold. That was bait, Dean muttered. He thinks we're just connecting emotionally. He doesn't realize we're coordinating. Think he'll bite? Dean's gaze was hard. He already has. He returned to the center of his cell, sat cross-legged again, and started humming. Kara followed suit. And across the hall, Varn stirred, leaning forward, eyes flickering to life. Not fully there, not yet. But healing had to start somewhere. In silence, they began to wait. Not for rescue. For the opportunity to strike. And when it came, they'd be ready. Dean stood motionless as the cell's wall liquefied for the third time that day. The corridor beyond looked unchanged, but the tension was different. No guards. No protocols. Just empty space. He stepped forward. Lights followed him, one beam at a time, like a trail designed to lead prey. At the end of the corridor, a door hissed open. Trask stood inside, alone, arms behind his back. The room was circular, barren except for a metallic chair in the center. I thought you preferred an audience, Dean said, not stepping in. I want truth, not performance, Trask replied, voice low. Dean crossed the threshold, slowly. The door sealed behind him. I've reviewed your patterns, Trask continued. Minimal physiological degradation. No emotional outbursts. No decline in reasoning. That is, irregular. Dean cracked his neck. Maybe your tech's outdated. Trask tilted his head. Humans are erratic. You grieve irrationally. Die pointlessly. Yet something resists collapse. Something primitive. Dean took a step closer. It's not primitive. It's choice. The alien walked slowly around him. Your species embraces suffering as identity. Why not yield? Why endure pain you cannot stop? Dean turned to face him. Because if I stop, you win. Trask narrowed his eyes. Victory was never in question. Then why are you alone in this room? That halted the alien. For a moment, silence thickened the air. Trask stepped forward, face inches from Dean's. You think you're making progress. I allow this dance because it reveals data. But beneath your calm, fear. Dean smiled. No. Beneath my calm is calculation. Trask moved suddenly, jabbing a clawed finger into Dean's temple. The lights dimmed. A spike of light shot across the walls. Dean winced, just barely, but remained upright. Memories flooded the room, projected from Traska's neurointerface. Dean's squad mates. EO7. The moment Chavez died. Dean's scream as blood sprayed across his visor. You relive this nightly, Trask whispered. You blame yourself. Dean's jaw tensed. You think that makes me weak? No, Trask said. It makes you predictable. Dean stepped back, breaking eye contact. He forced his breath to steady, shutting out the images. You didn't come here to dissect trauma, Dean said. You're here because something's eating you alive. You've seen what happens when humans break, only we don't stay broken. We evolve. Traska's eyes flickered. A crack. You fear what you can't control, Dean continued. That's why you needed this room, this moment. Because out there, in front of your crew, you can't show doubt. The alien bared his teeth. You presume too much. No, Dean said, his voice cold now. I observe. He turned his back deliberately, walking toward the chair. Sat down. Relaxed. You want data? I'll give you something to analyze. Trask didn't move. Dean leaned forward. Start with this. My heartbeat hasn't spiked once in this room. Yours has. Your eyes twitch every time I mention humanity. That's not curiosity, Commander. That's fear wearing a mask. The silence grew heavier. Then, without warning, the wall to Dean's left shifted. A hidden panel opened, revealing a display of captured footage, dozens of prisoners across the ship, isolated, trembling, broken. Dean's stomach turned. Each of them thought what you think, Trask said. That rebellion starts with words. It always ends with silence. Dean studied the screens. He spotted Kara in one cell, calm, but alert. She was mouthing something, timed, rhythmic. 4 syllables. Repeating. It was a signal. She'd picked up on something. Dean turned back. You still don't get it. This isn't about rebellion. Trask waited. Dean stood slowly. It's about adaptation. He tapped his temple. You're trying to cage instincts. But humans don't break clean. We bend. Shift. Adjust. That's why Earth's still standing. That's why your empire's stalling. You are insects with nukes. Trask growled. No, Dean said. We're wolves in a world of complacent lizards. Trask stepped back, nostrils flaring. Dean's tone dropped. I'm not here to survive your experiments. I'm here to finish them. With a sudden swipe, Trask launched a claw at Dean's chest. Dean barely dodged, falling into a crouch. The claw sliced his suit, blood welled up instantly. He didn't react. You want rage? Dean said, rising. I'll give you clarity instead. Trask lunged again. This time, Dean moved first. He grabbed the alien's arm, twisted, and kicked off the floor. The momentum sent both crashing to the ground. Trask roared, more shocked than hurt. Dean rolled clear, panting. Now that's a data point, he said. Trask stood slowly, seething. Dean reached into his suit, pulled a tiny shard from the hem, a chip no larger than a fingernail. Stolen tech. Stashed during his last medical exam. Kara had taught him how to hide it. He pressed it to the base of the wall. It beeped once, silently, and sank into the metal. Trask didn't notice. Dean walked back toward the center, arms open. You still think I'm alone in here? Trask's silence was all the confirmation Dean needed. He grinned. I'm the control group, he said. The others? They're already infected, with hope. And as he turned to leave, the chip behind him blinked twice. Connection established. The cage was no longer his prison. It was his platform. Inside cell 17B, Dean sat cross-legged, palms resting lightly on his knees. The floor pulsed beneath him, a subtle thrum of energy running through the living ship. He wasn't meditating, he was timing. 3 seconds between electrical pulses in the floor. 14 between light shifts. The pattern had stabilized. That meant automation. That meant the crew had stepped back. And that meant they were watching from afar. Perfect. He glanced at the wall opposite him. Kara's cell shimmered through faint energy distortions. She was pacing deliberately, tracing symbols on her wall with one finger, pausing at precise intervals. She wasn't anxious, she was sending data. He tapped his own wall twice, held his knuckle for a third. Confirmation. Phase 1 was complete. The network chip embedded in Traska's chamber had taken root. Kara had helped decode the ship's secondary AI protocol, passive observation units used to monitor non-critical zones. Those were the blind spots. Exactly where Dean needed them. Phase 2 began now. Dean stood. He stretched slowly, every muscle movement exaggerated, like a bored animal in a cage. The camera watching him blinked red once. He walked toward the corner of the cell and dropped to his knees, feigning fatigue. Then he whispered, "It's time." From 3 cells down, a sound rose. Just a cough. A rasp. But Varn was alive again. Across the row, Kara slumped against the wall, faking a minor seizure. Right on schedule. Dean started humming, 3 notes, pause, repeat. It seemed random. It wasn't. It was the cadence Kara had discovered in the ship's AI rhythm. Embedded code buried in tones the crew had overlooked. A backdoor. All Dean had to do now was play it long enough. Commander Trask stood before the central viewport of the Threxel. His claws dug into the edge of the console. The humans, Subject 17B especially, were deviating again. Not breaking. Not spiraling. Coordinating. That wasn't expected. Worse, the others were following suit. He turned to his second. "Run neural dampeners again. Triple strength. I want silence in that section." "Yes, Commander." But as the order was issued, the central AI stuttered. A flicker. A delayed response. Traska's eyes narrowed. No errors had been logged. No known breach. But the rhythm felt off. He stepped back from the console. Something was wrong. Back in the cell, the lights flickered once. Then again. Dean opened his eyes. Gotcha. The chip Kara had written into the ship's minor AI routines had just achieved what she called momentary override. Not full control. But a glitch big enough to slip a whisper through. He pressed his knuckle to the wall and dragged it down. The surface vibrated under his skin. From Kara's cell, her voice came low and tight. "We have 2 minutes." Dean moved fast. His hand snapped to the floor vent at the edge of his cell. Invisible to the eye, but detectable by thermal scan. He pried it open with a fragment of ceramic he'd chipped off his sink days ago. Inside, a palm-sized black box flickered once. The virus chip. Dean spoke into it. "Execute relay theta." The lights flared white, blinding for a half-second. Then darkness. Emergency red lit the corridor as alarms wailed. Not high-frequency torture tones, real emergency klaxons. He smiled. Across the hall, Kara was already moving, her cell door glitching with electrical spasms. Varn's door remained shut. Dean bolted to the wall. Slammed a fist against it. "Override in effect," Kara called out. "He's locked out." Dean pivoted. "Manual override, now!" She ran across the corridor, her fingers dancing across a cracked console panel near the emergency breaker. Sparks flew. Varn's door blinked once, then slid open with a reluctant groan. Varn staggered out, weak but standing. "Tell me I'm dreaming." "You're not," Dean said. "But you're about to get your second wind." Dean handed him a guard baton he'd swiped during his last force transfer. "Stick to my 6. Kara, take point." She nodded. The three of them sprinted through the dim corridor, alarms howling behind them. Trask watched the feed collapse in real time. Control panels blinked erratically. AI feedback loops stuttered in broken binary. Entire wings of the ship were going dark. They've breached. How? His lieutenant stammered. Trask slammed his fist into the console. Seize 17B. Send all units. But they've disabled our tracking grid. Then hunt him. But Trask already knew. This wasn't a breach. It was an infection. A virus of defiance. And it had started 10 minutes ago. With a man who smiled inside a cage. Dean and the others moved through auxiliary corridors Kara had mapped from overheard whispers and flashes of reflected screens. Zarnathi guards rushed from distant sectors, too slow to intercept. Kara stopped at a sealed gate. This leads to the command buffer. It's where the central AI syncs for performance updates. Can you crack it? I can do better, she said, and slapped the final chip against the panel. It beeped twice. The door slid open. Inside, screens buzzed with flickering code. One panel showed Trask, wild-eyed, shouting orders, surrounded by panic. Dean walked to the primary broadcast node. Plugged in the stolen interface Kara had modified. A timer appeared. 30 seconds to ship-wide feed override. You're gonna broadcast? Varn asked. Dean nodded. They tried to make us ghosts. We're about to haunt them instead. Kara looked at him. Make it count. Dean faced the main camera, blood on his face, eyes hard. When the timer hit 0, he spoke. This is Sergeant Dean Rourke, Earth Intergalactic Division. He leaned forward. I walked into your cage. He smiled. I'm walking out laughing. Trask stormed through the collapsing nerve center of the Threxel, smoke curling from busted panels, sparks raining from the ceiling like angry fireflies. Sirens shrieked in layers, system failure, prisoner breach, command override. His empire's pride, reduced to malfunction and fear. Guards scrambled past him in disarray, weapons drawn, scanning corners too late. He ignored them. He was going to the broadcast deck, where the human was waiting. Dean stood at the center of the chamber, blood crusted on his collar, hands open at his sides. The camera was still live, its blinking red light sending his words across the entire ship, maybe further. Rebels on fringe worlds, enslaved colonies, other prisoners who thought resistance was extinct. Behind him, Kara manned the access panel, rerouting surveillance away from their sector. Varn sat nearby, clutching his ribs, breath shallow but eyes clear. You think he's coming? Dean didn't look away from the door. He won't let this go unanswered. Footsteps echoed outside, heavy, measured, deliberate. Dean rolled his neck once. Here we go. The door slid open with a violent hiss. Trask stepped inside alone, armored plate steaming, clawed fists curled. Dean took 2 steps forward, body relaxed, voice even. No guards? Brave. You've embarrassed me, Trask growled. You've infected my ship. I should kill you slowly. Dean's smile was sharp. You already tried slow. It didn't stick. The alien advanced. You think this broadcast matters? You think defiance changes anything? I think the entire galaxy just saw you lose control. Trask roared and charged. Dean sidestepped fast, pivoted, and struck behind the knee joint with the baton he'd stashed in his boot. The alien stumbled but recovered with a vicious backhand that clipped Dean's shoulder and sent him into the wall. Dean groaned, breath catching, but forced himself up. Trask was fast. He couldn't win this with brute strength. But he didn't have to. He just had to outlast. The alien lunged again. Dean ducked low, drove his shoulder into Traska's side, then kicked off the floor to twist behind him. He gripped the base of Traska's spine with both hands, right where Kara had marked the neural interface was installed, and slammed the baton into it. A pulse of energy cracked out. Trask screamed, convulsed, and dropped to one knee. Dean stepped back, panting. Trask looked up, eyes wild. You are nothing. Dean walked forward slowly, limping, shoulders squared. No. he said. I'm human. He reached down and yanked Traska's head up by the collar. And you just learned what that means. Trask growled, lips curling. Dean held his gaze. I could kill you. Kara's voice cut in from the console. Ship-wide link is still hot. You've got eyes on you. Dean thought for a moment. Then he let go. Stepped back. Not today, he said. Today you live with it. He turned to the camera. Let this be recorded, Dean said, his voice strong despite the tremor in his bones. The Empire tried to break us. It failed. This isn't rebellion. This is retribution. Behind him, Trask struggled to stand, shaking, silent. Kara tapped the console again. Signal's been picked up by external relays. Independent ships, too. They're rebroadcasting. Dean met her eyes. It's not just about getting out anymore, she said. He nodded. Then we give them the path. 20 minutes later, the prisoners, human and otherwise, were moving freely through the non-lethal sections of the ship. Some were wounded. Most were dazed. All of them were watching Dean. He stood on the ramp leading to the command deck, shoulders squared despite the bruises across his ribs. You're free, he told them. Not because they allowed it. Because you took it. No one cheered. Not yet. But something heavier passed through the crowd, understanding. Power. A single Zarnathi technician limped forward, arms raised in surrender. You don't intend to kill us? Dean shook his head. You're going to pilot this ship. The tech blinked. To where? Home, Dean said. And not just ours. As the Threxel limped away from Vargan 8's orbit, its engines running at half capacity, a wave of messages flooded external space. Systems across the sector pinged alerts. The humans had not only survived captivity, they had hijacked their captor's voice and changed the story. Later, in the medbay turned temporary operations center, Kara sat beside Dean, who was finally allowing himself to rest. His arm was in a sling, his jaw dark with bruises. She handed him a water pouch. You sure about letting Trask live? Dean drank, then wiped his mouth. He's worth more alive, humiliated, beaten, stripped of power. Let the Empire feel what disgrace smells like. Kara leaned back. Still, that was a hell of a fight. Dean smiled faintly. Marine training. She chuckled. That, or just good old-fashioned stubbornness. Dean's eyes closed briefly. Then opened. We've got one chance to keep this going. They'll regroup. Then we stay ahead, she said. Keep broadcasting. Tell the story. Give others something to believe in. He nodded slowly. Then whispered, Chavez would have loved this. She didn't ask who that was. She just sat with him. Silent. Unbroken. Alive. And across the galaxy, for the first time in decades, the name of humanity was no longer spoken in whispers of weakness, but with caution and respect.